Okay, if everyone could take their seats, we better press on. So I'm delighted to now introduce Dr. Jason Cleverley. He is course leader for BA Product and Furniture at Chelsea College of Arts. Jason is a maker, researcher, and lecturer.
Thank you very much. Hello. So what's useful for museum engagement and interpretation? Let's start with what kind of activity goes on in the museum within the ecology of action. When I was younger, I used to lick paintings. I wanted to get as close as possible to the physical materiality of work by fabulous, arcane artists. With one eye out for museum staff, heart racing, I would lean in closely, examining the brushwork, and then flick out my tongue, briefly making contact with something, probably varnish. I realise, of course, this is wrong on many levels and something I would never do again. But the urge to connect physically with the authentic was strong. I was in the British Museum, a gallery called Collecting the World. In the middle of the room was a substantial glass vitrine containing a large yellow and blue vessel by Grayson Perry called the Rosetta Vase. As I moved around the display, I noticed that the floorboard shifted and the vitrine and the pot started to wobble quite a bit, and that began to interest me quite a lot. I was in the National Museum of Scotland. An exhibit caught my eye. The exhibit was demonstrating a robotic arm. I had a go. The exhibit seemed slightly disconcerted by my choice of words, or choice of word. You have typed bum. Is this right? I was in the Wedgwood Museum in Staffordshire the other year. The virtual medallion interactive allowed visitors to become a Wedgwood-style cameo. Looking through the archive, I noticed some of the visitors had contributed in interesting ways. The moose ears, the V's up, stuck-out tongue, single-finger gesture all appear quite regularly if you look at those archives. I was in a museum in Barcelona, and I learnt just how heavy medieval armour can be. I was in the Science Museum. I was able to touch a lovely model of a satellite. In the mid-20th century, Friedrich Kiesler's designs allowed paintings to be manipulated. In Peggy Guggenheim's Art of the Century gallery, designed by Kiesler and opened in New York in 1942, the gallery showed paintings that were supported on struts, allowing visitors to rotate, slide the work around, and this was accompanied by changing lighting and sounds. Museums have always been a place for social interaction, for people to show off. Objects forming catalysts for conversation. This piece works when a visitor moves in front of the screen to reveal the underpainting and the different decisions made by the artist constable. The design brief from the curator to the museum team, all of us, was to foster an understanding amongst visitors, both those using the interactives and importantly those merely witnessing their use. Contingency of action supports use. Other initiatives in museums include artist-directed workshops, activities that form a finished installation or an exhibition where the public are supported in a creative, transformational approach to interpretation. So in summary, in the museum we have kinetic affordance, open-ended creative transformation, socially supportive interaction, all forms of engagement and interpretation, even rogue activities like my own. All this maps onto Falcon Deerking's contextual model of learning in museums. I'm sure some of you know. That is to say, the personal context, the socio-cultural context, and the physical context. In earlier work, I was preoccupied with interaction through movement. I made a lot of automata, like this pike, which came to life as you pushed it physically along, or things like this radio that didn't really look like a radio, where the sound came out from a bowl of cherries, or this crab, an electric crab, and as you moved towards it, it started to move as sensors received the information that you were close to it. An increasing interest in interaction led to a collaboration with social scientists. I made this for them, a piece called Deus Oculi. I didn't really know what I was doing. It just felt right. Heuristic, drawing on my own artistic and design preoccupations. What they asked me to do was make something that would engender collaboration and participation. So on the left we have a handset, on the right another handset. In the middle of is a Renaissance scene that I confected out of some other paintings. You can see in the handset is a small monitor in the pupil of the eye. On the main painting there were faces. You could flip them open, and behind there were small monitors connected to the cameras. And it's a bit like those seaside boards where you stick your head through a hole and you look like somebody else. And there it was set up in this particular space. So I'm just going to show you a short fragment. I've shown this quite a lot of times, but it's a really useful piece of evidence about how people behave together. So audience experiences are principally produced and evidenced through social interaction. Here we see on the right, you can just see a bit of pink, and there's a guy with the sideboards, and then in the middle there's a woman with a headband being followed by a chap with a beard. So if you keep an eye on all those figures, let me just run it for you. So she moves into the space. She sees my piece on the left, calls it visual art. And she opens the windows or the doors. Her friends move around, and maybe her friends move around here. And she notices them appearing in the camera.
Oh, I see, it's you! If you look through there, you're already, look. If you come here.
So she's immediately getting to do something, and then she responds with like, ooh. A very important ooh.
Isn't it great? It's visual art.
Isn't it great? So that, I mean, the amount of time that happened was fractional, and the main woman with the headband was really supporting action from her colleague, and it was so quick. So it's a kind of scaffolding. So that just shows how quickly and easily individuals support each other in these kinds of spaces. So I undertook several projects which asked the audience to consider paintings and museum objects through my designs, and to engage in new ways with collections. Here's another version of the piece we've just seen.
Go check, it's so pretty. That one.
He loves it, that boy. So an understanding of social behaviour became part of my design agenda. So the children here really actively engage with the piece. Whether they're using it properly is another question. Whether they're using it in the way I designed to use it. Evaluation showed that I'd often created chances for creative misuse. There's a nice section here. Look at your eye. Okay, so basically you're supposed to arrange some objects on that stage, and then there's a screen. They're models of objects within this museum and island, and it's called the Universal Curator, so you can create your own cabinet which appears on the screen. But the children particularly keen on the fact that if you stick your face right up to the camera, then your eye appears huge on the screen. So that seemed more important to them. So I really like that kind of ludic behaviour that goes on. Another piece, this is about drawing. So drawing's obviously a brilliant way of getting people to engage with objects. This machine run up and down this vitrine here, and you could draw using that system that Scheer used, where you make a grid, and it's easier to copy what you can see. And I think quite often when you ask people to do things creatively in a museum, like a drawing task, you have to give them a bit of help. So something like the grid eases their self-consciousness about drawing. So this is a piece, a much more complex piece. This is in Dr. Johnson's house in Gough Square, just off the Strand in London. And this is the room where Johnson wrote the dictionary, or compiled his famous dictionary. And as I was reading about There's no furniture in it now, but at the time apparently there was a large table, and on that table were bits of paper floating around, being moved around, being brought in by amanuenses, his helpers, and the definitions were on those bits of paper. So I recreated a table. I also have this escritoire on the right, a lovely demographic. That's my family. It all seems to work quite well. Ethically, it's all fine, I think. So they're using the pen and paper. And here's some of the examples of the kind of handwriting, the kind of notes that Johnson would have had moving around that table. So using a digital pen and paper system, so you've got an analogue biro, but it has a little camera in it, and it can read where it is on the paper. And each piece of paper has its own code, and therefore you can write onto the pro forma and you can make up words, and that was the idea for this piece. Quite complicated when it came to swearing, which it sort of wouldn't allow because its own internal dictionary didn't have any swear words in it. But then we realised we wanted people to make up words, and then anyway, it got rather complicated and lots of moderation took place. Anyway, so what was quite nice is that people could make up words and then send them up to the escritoire, and then they would ultimately go to the web. And there's lots of examples. This one, quite nice. Finchley, a bit like a finch. That's quite a nice one. Anyway, this is the main piece I'm going to talk about. It's called The Enlightened Eye. And it's the main kind of case study for my PhD. Small gallery, a small provincial museum in Liskeard, a mining area, fantastic collection of minerals. And the curator had secured some money, and she was going to revamp the minerals gallery. And this is the original. When I first visited it, they had these very sort of straightforward cases. She really wanted to try a lot of different things. And she was quite keen. When she saw some things I was doing, she was quite keen to get me involved, and there was some money, so that was great. Perfect for me. So I started to research, and I wanted to use the microscope as a method for creative transformation of objects. The microscope is an iconic scientific device as well. Everyone kind of understands what they do. And also, as I was researching, you find all sorts of fascinating things, like it was also used in proto-cinema entertainment. You can see there's an actual comfortable sort of cinema space up there, and a microscope would project water fleas and so on onto the wall. So that was a real blockbuster of the day there, the water flea. Other devices that influenced me, like the Kaiser panorama, which sort of developed in the 1880s, relied on recently developed stereoscopic images. So you look through the hole and you could see stereoscopic images, news of the day, educational, entertaining, a great experience for the audience. There's still one in the Museum of German History in Berlin. It might actually be this one, if you want to see one. Other things that were informing this design, the Camera Obscura. It's a really nice Camera Obscura here, which you can use for drawing, obviously. And so I'm concerned with both the aesthetic, sculptural quality of my work, as well as the function. And one of the things I was really keen to do was think about form and the form of machines, and the kind of way they have a sort of business end, and an area where you fiddle with things, and a kind of direction, not necessarily connected with their function. Well, it is connected with their function, but there's a certain sort of shape that you get, a kind of attitude. Other things that influenced me for this were obviously paintings like this, Joseph Wright of Derby, a philosopher lecturing on the orrery. I really like this Age of Enlightenment image where it's like a secular nativity where people are leaning in, and the Age of Enlightenment is bathing it with this newfound wonders, and children and women are also allowed to have a look. And engagement with like these kind of tableaux that form around glowing. I keep coming across these, and I find these really lovely. So anyway, I did lots of drawings, lots of thinking, lots of trying out how's this going to work. How I'm going to get the microscope to look closely at these minerals. Developed maquettes. There's a little test there in Lego Wright of Derby, that one. And then here's a sketch. So this is a test sketch. So you're able. So as the idea grew and came together, I was able I developed the concept, I tested the idea of allowing visitors' agency over an object through the microscope and through the physical movement of objects. So you could wind the handle and it translated to a little carousel, and I stuck various things on there. And then we had the microscope here, a digital microscope, and you could focus it as well. There was a wheel for focusing it. And then I tried it out in various contexts. There's the wheel for focusing. People seem to like it. You can see the glee on their faces as they look at a fly's wing and they can control it. So some test, here's a little test with a piece of mineral. So it's quite nice the way it's almost like a planet moving in front of you. And there's issues with wobbling and stuff because when you're jumping up and down on floors, it translates to quite small scale. What I wanted to do is use it a bit like the Dura thing, where you can use a net to make it easy to draw. The idea here was, as with clouds and other kinds of organic structures, you see endless kinds of shapes and forms. On the left, we've got a mineral. On the right, a satellite picture of a lake. And at this time, I was just seeing faces in every single rock, and every tiny bit of lichen looked like a tree, and it was just, I was absolutely almost crazy with comparative morphology. Anyway, so then I carried on testing this possibility and rigging up kind of prototype versions of what I wanted to make. And we got some really good responses. I have to say, I did a lot of this work is down to working with technicians, in particular Tim Scheer, who helped me with the Dr. Johnson piece as well, and I don't think I could do any of this stuff without him. And that's a really important issue, is to find people who know what they're doing with things that you just don't know about. Anyway, so there we can see a test here. So there's a bit of quartz. I was given a load of samples by the museum. And here I've got lots of lovely images through. I did actually suggest, what I did suggest was, can you see anything in those structures? And we had all sorts of responses. In this case, we can see 3 foxes appearing in close-up bits of quartz. And then obviously I developed the piece further, thinking about what it would look like and how big it would be and all those kinds of things. And I gradually built the whole thing. And you've got this is the first sort of outing where it was at a conference when I was testing it. You can see the screen, which somebody's done a rather nice portrait. I don't know who that is, but anyway, you can see how. Oh, actually, I've got a diagram that explains that. So you've got the large screen, you've got the microscope, you've got that orrery handle. As you turn it, the minerals move around. There's a focus wheel. I really wish I hadn't made a physical focus wheel, but I want people to use these pieces of technology in a kind of quite basic way, with the handles. And I could have had an autofocus, but I chose to rig up something that would allow you to turn the focus, and actually that was a bit tricky to sustain. But anyway, touchscreen at the back, laptop inside the Camera Obscura bit. You can draw over the top of the images that you select, and then obviously it goes to the screen and then up. And again, a bit of moderation needs to occur in case someone's written that the Lord Mayor of Liskeard is a bastard or whatever it might be. So, okay, there's a bit closer. Planetary gears. The minerals move around in front of the lens. And then I devised a way of putting the minerals into these kind of kebab sticks so it wouldn't damage them. And also you could change and use different size minerals using that system. So once it was in position, there was a slight change, an addition. There was a list of the minerals, where they came from and what they were, and also within the dome, each mineral section had a number, so you could then cross-reference from that list, that sort of legend, to find a mineral. And maybe you'd have, and actually I found that quite a lot of people knew the places and kind of liked sort of cross-referencing with that simple list. And then these are the results, and this is the kind of final interface, again developed by my colleague Tim Scheer. And you could undo, it's like a bit like a Photoshop system, and you could undo things, and you could rub things out and change the thickness of line and all those kinds of things. And that's what it looked like on the website, so you could go back and review them or visit the ones that you've done. Some of the results are really great, some really complex results. Some scary results as well. That one popped up. Okay, so now I spend time in the room. I've set up a camera and I'm drawing, I'm making notes, and I'm making a video record. If we just play this one, hopefully it'll play. So they're looking at the list, they lean in and they all point, and they move around, and the little girl says, "Number 5 is there." I looked at this fragment quite a lot. At the same time as evaluating this data, I started to think, how can I both capture the data, understand it for myself, and then re-present it? And I really liked the drawings that I was doing at the same time, because I was having to do them quite quickly. There was a sort of liveliness to them. And I cross-referenced these with the video. When I was listening to the sound, it was quite good because I'd had these kind of transcripts that made me, because sometimes you can't quite hear what people are saying, and this would confirm some of the dialogue, which was really important. And I thought maybe I could make some kind of, use this in some way to show the activity. You can see the girl there appears twice. I don't know if you noticed, but she's got a lovely, she's just holding a doll like this, sort of limply, and constantly clutching that doll. But she appears twice, and there's quite a lot of drawings like this, and I really like that liveliness, but it wasn't actually that useful for focusing on particular things that I wanted to talk about. So I wondered if I could then sort of do a hybrid of the drawing that I was doing, and I started to do it from my video record. And I made a lot of notes from the video, so it was like I was revisiting the place where I already had been and rethinking it. Other things I started to do were to see what kind of underlying social conventions there were, see where things were being learnt, seeing where different kinds of behaviour were going on. So I'd make drawings like this which show those kinds of activities and where bits were happening and so on. And where people were going into epistemic flows, or where they were being ludic, or where they were understanding something, or whether they were interested at all. So if we just go back to that video that I showed a moment ago, as I say, I looked at this over and over again. Obviously, I've pixelated out the faces, but the drawings are also quite useful for re-representing things in terms of ethics, because you've anonymised people. So if I just play this, what I'm going to try and do is stop it moving. So if you remember, they're reading the list of where the objects are, the minerals are, and then they're all going to look for number 5 because they want to find number 5, and they're going to lean in and start to do that. I'm just going to try and catch. Hold on, bear with me. There's that little doll there. Anyway, so look, they lean in. I'm trying to slow it down for you. They say, number 5, where's number 5? Now, the little girl, she begins to, I don't know if you can see, she begins to prepare her finger for looking for number 5. And what I thought was actually a really quick jab, where they all did it at the same time. When you run it slower, you can see that she's slightly later, and actually the more I looked at it, the more it appeared that she wasn't really looking for number 5. She was waiting to see where the others had found number 5. And then, of course, she goes round. Lovely bit where she claims it for her own. Number 5 is there, like she's done all the work. She's a lovely bit of scaffolding. And obviously I could represent that in there. And the other thing about the drawings that I felt was important for me as I call myself an artist designer, I guess, is that everyday activities or everyday occurrences, I mean, not that it's that every day, there's a kind of, once you start to look at things, there's a kind of symmetry, there's a composition to everything that happens. And I really began to enjoy that, and I suppose through the drawing I'm kind of nuancing things, and I'm picking out particular bits of evidence. I mean, it's a bit like that issue about drawing minerals or drawing botanical specimens. It's actually a better way in some way than photography for exposing qualities of particular objects. But this, I mean, this is slightly tricky, but I quite like the way that, say, Goya painted these conversation pieces, and they're everyday activities, but there's this lovely kind of triangle going on. And I keep seeing these triangles in my work. I'm kind of choreographing people, I suppose. James Gibson says, a distinction is possible between what is commonly called experience at first hand and experience at second hand. In the former, one becomes aware of something. In the latter, one is made aware of something. So I think that kind of using drawing to point things out, to point things up, is really useful. This is quite a nice little fragment. So it's really short. Is it going to run? If you look at the woman's finger in the middle, look at that. It's just whiz. Let's see if I can slow it down. So I looked at this over and over again. Look, and her hand is just sort of like a hummingbird in the air, isn't it? Anyway, what she's doing is describing to the girl what she might do. So it's kind of embodied gestural pointing thing. Pointing occurs a lot in my data, and it's great. But so she wiggles it, and she comes down, she does another wiggle, and then there's a kind of sign off at the bottom. There is an argument after this about, the woman in the puffer jacket says you're making her do something she possibly doesn't want to do, and stop putting your own opinion about how the drawing should. But anyway, I spent ages looking at that, and the eye, so she goes, you can have his eye. She does 7 wiggles, and then the nose has only got 2. I guess that's a little less important. And then the mouth just tails off at the end, but she's drawn in space against the picture on the wall. This is what the little girl eventually did. The little girl did loads of brilliant drawings, but they were quite subtle, quite restrained. But anyway, she didn't do the nose, did she? She did the eyebrow. It looks like she disregarded the advice. Just another piece here. This is quite a nice one. Another kind of scaffolding that was going on here was a family. And in this case, rather than in the previous example where the little girl was kind of made to feel as if, or she, the end result was she was in charge, really, even though she was being supported. In this case, the father, I believe it was the father, but the male in the group, the older male, said, well, I'm going to have a go first, and then I'll work it out how to do it, and then I'll let you lot have a go, and you can find out how to do it from my example. So he was there for quite some time thinking about what he was going to do, and he had this marvellous kind of a gesture. So he kept making these kind of small diagrams in the air about what he was going to do. And then he did it, and he finished the piece, and he signed it at the bottom, and then everybody else in the family was allowed to have a go too. But what I thought was a lovely echo of what he'd done was the smaller child, the youngest child, seemed to spend some time also considering what they were going to do. And this brilliant sort of, scratching of the head and rubbing and sort of looking at the hands and then scratching the head and going, and then finally, so he was doing this kind of pantomiming thing as well. A bit more complex, this piece of pantomiming. And he ended up making this, which was apparently a lion eating the moon, but anyway. This is quite a nice piece. A group of apparently unsupervised children dart around the ecology of action, displaying ludic behaviour, unintended, but still they're engaged and active. I really like the fact that after a while I thought, well, you're not doing what I want you to do, but you're just having a great time. And I spent quite a lot of time examining this data as well. And just a last one here, which is, this is a fabulous piece of scaffolding in a way, because the group of 3 people, the older girl and the older man, allow the child, the child that's using the piece at the moment on the right, he waits until the other 2 have had a go, and they really give him a lot of space, but he doesn't engage at all until he gets onto the screen, and then he spends quite a long time, about 10 minutes, confecting and constructing the TARDIS. And he really, you could just tell that what was lovely is that they'd gone over there and they let him, carry on with it, because they know he would go into this kind of flow state and really allow him to paint or to draw his TARDIS. This is my last slide here. The ebb and flow between the contextual and artistic propositions. I tried to make a diagram. So I'm an artist and a designer. Those 2 things are fighting each other. There's obviously things like health and safety, but then can't we make it like this? There's ethnography versus choreography, the practical affordances and the aesthetic affordances. I won't go on too deeply into that, but I really enjoyed having an argument with myself and about the way things push against the two different parts of one's way of thinking. So anyway, just to finish off, I reckon that I think that the museum interpretive can be like an artificial coral reef, a structure affording multiple cognitive niches for feeding and connecting in the rich ocean of the museum. It works quite well for me to think about it in those ways. So, thank you.